Welcome back to another episode of Basic Baking on the Scran line. I'm Nick. Today I'm going to be taking you through my top tips for making amazing cupcakes. Now today's video is sponsored by Queen Fine Foods. I've been using Queen Fine Food vanilla extract since before I started making videos on YouTube. I just love the way that it tastes. It's really delicious. And guys, when you're using important ingredients like vanilla extract, you want to make sure you're using really good quality ones, not imitation products like vanilla flavoring. When it comes to cupcakes, you want to make sure you fill them the correct amount. It ensures that all of your cupcakes bake at the same time, but also that they're all filled the same so that they all look the same when they bake. Now, the easiest way that I found to do this, and this is a trick I learned when I used to work in a bakery, is to use an ice cream scoop. Now, I use this ice cream scoop. It's like the ones that you can like squeeze at the bottom. It's got like this squeezing mechanism, but it has this little bowl at the top here, and that's obviously where your batter goes into. Now, typically you do use these for ice cream, but they're really great for scooping cupcake batter and even cake batter. And again, you get the same amount in each cupcake liner each time you do it. And I actually find this is the easiest way to get the same amount of batter into your cake tins as well. So once you've prepared your cake tins, you just pop them next to each other and you scoop until you run out of batter. And that way, you know, every single cake tin has the same amount of batter. Temperature control. So temperature control is really important when it comes to baking. Now, we all have ovens, hopefully. That's what we use to make cakes and cupcakes, but not every oven is the same. So for that reason, they don't all bake at the same temperature. So you might have your dial at 175 degrees Celsius, which is what most cake and cupcake recipes ask you to bake at, but it's actually running about 15 degrees Celsius higher than that. And that is what can result in dome cupcakes, or what I like to call volcano cupcakes, cakes or cupcakes that crack. You want to avoid that. And you want to avoid that because it doesn't look good. But also, if you get a nice flat cake or a flat cupcake, it's easier to deal with. So with a flat top cupcake, it's easier to frost. It looks so much nicer. But with a flat cake, you don't need to trim any excess cake off the top. You can just trim them in half, and that way you can start stacking your cakes without, well, basically skipping a step of trimming the top. The other thing is that it results in a whiter cupcake, and that's important when you've got colored cupcake batter or colored cake batter. So on a lower temperature or the right temperature, you avoid colorization or caramelization, and your bright colors stay bright. So I actually bake on 140 degrees Celsius for my cakes and cupcakes, which is a lot lower than most other recipes, and I bake for a slower amount of time as well. But I get that nice bright colors or no colorization or caramelization when I bake. Using good quality ingredients. Now, the first thing is vanilla extract. I don't measure vanilla extract, by the way, I just pour it in. I just believe you can never have too much vanilla extract. And again, I use the Queen Fine Foods vanilla extract. It's really high quality, it tastes great. You also want to make sure you're using really good quality ingredients for your cakes, but also for your frosting. So when you're using butter for your frosting or your cakes, make sure it's good quality butter and not that really cheap, nasty stuff. That cheap butter can tend to have a higher water content and not a high fat content, which is what you want. With a higher water content, especially when you're making frosting, I found that your frosting looks kind of shiny, not in a good way. It looks like it's sweating and it just looks like it's split. So make sure you're using really good quality butter. Free range eggs if you can, because they taste better, but regular eggs are okay. When you overbake, you dry out your cupcakes or your cakes. Now, the best way to check if your cupcakes and cakes have baked is by using the pin prick method or inserting a skewer into the center of the cake or cupcake. If it comes out dry with no wet batter, and trust me, you'll know if it's not baked, keep baking. Once that toothpick or cake tester comes out with no wet batter, it's time to take your cupcakes out of the oven. Over baking can result in shrinking cupcakes as well. When you finish baking your cupcakes, not only are they gonna look really dry and you'll be able to tell, but as they cool, they shrink, and that can be a problem because your cupcake liners might come away. Always bake your cupcakes or your cakes or whatever you're making, macarons as well, in the center of the oven. It's really, really important that you bake in the center shelf of the oven. If you need to adjust your oven shelves, usually you can do that with most ovens. So do that before you turn it on. The reason why you want to do that is because if you put your cake or your cupcakes or macarons up too high, there's a lot of heat up there and it can tend to cook a little bit too quickly and sometimes brown, which you don't want. If you bake it on the bottom, the same thing can happen underneath your cupcakes or cakes, and you can end up with like crispy cakes or cupcakes on the bottom and kind of pale white cakes and cupcakes on the top. If you bake in the center of the oven, that is where the heat is distributed the most evenly, and that's the ideal place to bake. When you're coring your cupcakes, and this is a bit of a weird one, but I like to actually core the center of my cupcakes sometimes and fill them up with sprinkles or chocolate sauce. I tend to heat up my sauce a little bit just to thin it out a little bit so it's easier to fill my cupcakes. If you core the entire way to the bottom of your cupcake, you risk having soggy cupcakes on the bottom when you fill it up with your sauces especially. So make sure that you're leaving about 1 centimeter away from the bottom when you're coring. Sounds like a weird one to mention, but trust me, when you're serving your cupcakes to your guests, you don't want them coming back saying, the bottom of my cupcake was soggy. When you're adding berries to your cake or cupcake batter, it's really important to add a little bit of extra time when you're baking. And the reason is because even when you're using fresh or frozen raspberries, for example, and you're adding them into your batter, you're actually adding more moisture into the cake. And as they bake, they release that moisture into the cake. So it does make sense that you need to bake about 10 or 15 minutes longer. Again, use the cake method or the pin prick method and just check that your cakes and cupcakes are baked. Another bit of a weird one is, and I get this question a lot, is can I make my batter ahead of time and then just bake it tomorrow, just to save time? It sounds great in theory, but the reason you can't or shouldn't do that is because most cake and cupcake recipes have raising agents in them. And those raising agents are activated as soon as you add moisture or certain types of moisture to them. So if you are making your batter today, for example, to use it tomorrow and bake your cupcakes or cakes, that raising agent has already kind of expired and been activated. So as soon as you finish making your batter, you want to bake your cupcakes and cakes. Once your cupcakes or cakes have baked, you want to make sure that you let them cool down completely. And I know this is an obvious one, but when I was younger, I actually made a chocolate cake. I have this vivid memory, and instead of letting it cool down completely, I was just so excited to make this chocolate cake. I put the buttercream frosting on top, and of course, the cake was still warm and butter melts, so it melted. Now, the reason I bring up this very obvious fact that you need to let them cool down completely is because you also don't want to try and quicken that process or make it go faster by adding them in the fridge to cool down. And the reason you don't want to do that is because it can actually cause your cupcakes or cakes to shrink, and that again can cause them to come away from your cupcake liners. So let them cool down at room temperature completely before you start decorating. Now, once my cupcakes and cakes have actually cooled down, especially with my cakes, I like to work with chilled cakes when I'm putting them together. So when I'm filling them and crumb coating, I like to work with chilled cakes. So once they have cooled at room temperature, I actually cover them in plastic wrap and pop them in the fridge, and then start decorating and putting my cake together the next day. So you can do that, but don't pop them straight out of the oven into the fridge. It's a recipe for disaster. For best results storing your cupcakes and cakes, you should store them in an airtight container in the fridge. If you don't want to store them in the fridge, that's fine. They last about 3 days out of the fridge in an airtight container, but they last a little bit longer, maybe like 4 or 5 days in the fridge. Of course, if you're going to be chilling a cake or cupcakes in the fridge before you serve them, you want to make sure that you thaw them before you serve them. So let them sit out at room temperature. Depending on how warm it is where you are, if it's a warm environment, let them thaw about 30 minutes. But if it's kind of just a regular day like it is here in Melbourne, let them thaw for about an hour and then serve them to your guests. I hope you guys enjoyed watching this video. I felt that these are some of your most common questions that you guys ask me, and I just wanted to make a video to kind of clear a couple things up. If there's something that I missed, and there probably is, let me know in the comments down below so that I can answer it for you guys in another video. I just wanted to say a huge thank you again to Queen Fine Foods for sponsoring this video. I love their vanilla extract, and again, you want to make sure you're using good quality ingredients when you're making cakes and cupcakes. So I use their vanilla extract. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you all on the next episode of Basic Baking. Bye.